Hi, y'all. Welcome back to Eat, Read, Sleep. I am Kalena.
And I'm Tapas.
And today we are going to be reviewing one of Tapas's favorite book, Courage is Calling by Ryan Holiday. So it is actually entering into Leo season, and both of us are actually Leos. We have birthdays coming up.
Yep.
So I know this book is very meaningful to you, and I actually wanted to do an early celebration for you, T. And I got you a little gift.
Oh,
so,
all right. Okay.
I was thinking long and hard. When you get someone that's a stoic that like really just doesn't need anything or want anything, so let's see if I did you justice, buddy. Okay. So if you guys don't know, Ryan Holiday is one of Tapas's favorite authors, and I know that you don't have this book yet because it's a more of a daily.
God. This is so cool.
Hold on, check it.
And it's signed by
from Mr. Ryan Holiday himself.
Wow. This is so cool. This is so cool. Yes.
Okay. Memento Mori Tapas from Ryan Holiday.
Yep, right there.
That's the wrong arm.
Right there.
That means you need another tattoo on
Yes, I do. Okay. Oh, that's so cool. Thank you.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you, dude.
So with that, we are going to be diving into Ryan Holiday and his book, Courage is Calling. So, T, do you want to share with our viewers maybe like why or how this book came about to you in your life?
Yes. So, Ryan Holiday is one of my favorite authors. I stumbled upon him a while ago when I was going down this. It was one of his motivational videos I was watching, and it was I came across Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and there was some quotes on there, and I'm like, wow, this is so interesting. This is so cool about stoicism. And on the right hand side, it has a recommended feed, and I saw a Ryan Holiday one, and it was like top 5 things from meditations that he learned. So once I watched that video, I got into this super deep, like...
You went down this rabbit hole.
Of, like, stoicism and learning about Ryan Holiday and all of his books. And then I read some of his earlier work. So, Obstacle is a Way, Ego is the Enemy, Stillness
Which
is
your favorite book, right?
Yeah, Ego is the Enemy is my personal favorite book of Ryan Holiday. And so I was like, they're all amazing books. And I think Ego is the Enemy was the one that really spoke to me at the time because there was some stuff I was struggling with. And then this book came, and this is his most recent book that he just published in 2021. And he has a new one coming out in September called, I think, Discipline or something. But this was most recent when I read this, and I think, again, it's kind of Ego is the Enemy. It like came to me at the right time.
Yeah.
Because I knew I was at a point in my life where I needed to make some change, and I needed courage. And so this book kind of like really pumped me up. He's like almost like a coach, and like he really kind of pumps you up. So that's why I stumbled upon this book. And when I read it the first time, I was like, wow, this was remarkable. So
yeah, I really like Ryan Holiday because he's kind of like a no BS. If you guys follow him on TikTok or watch his reels, like when he speaks to you, he really is like that coach that you say. He just kind of walks you through what you need to know in life, and it's just so matter of fact that you're like, oh, why didn't I know that before?
Yeah.
So with that, let's cheers because Tapas made us some what is old fashioned?
It's old fashioned, but you just taste the bourbon.
It tastes like bourbon.
I promise I added sugar and stuff. But
so wanted to cheers to a couple of different things. We within this week have actually hit a couple of more milestones in Eat, Read, Sleep. So we're very, very excited about that, and wanted to thank all of you guys for being a part of this journey. And for those of you who have subscribed, thank you so much. It means so much to us to know that you are on this path with us and watching and listening and hopefully learning something from us every week. And then also to our birthdays, to your birthday, happy birthday, and to Courage. Yes.
Cheers. Straight bourbon. That's all it is. I
don't think either of us drink much anymore, so we only do it for this segment, and it hits really quickly. Yeah. All right, so Courage is Calling. Ryan Holiday does a really good job of putting this book. It's very straightforward. He goes through the intro of what courage is all about, goes through courage as one of the 4 stoic virtues, the touchstone of goodness, as Marcus Aurelius references. And he goes through a 3-step process. So fear is the first one. Fear is what gets in your way. And then once you can get through the fear, you go into courage. And then after courage, you transcend to this higher level of heroism. It's called the heroic. So 3-step process to go through your courage and then ultimately impact not just your own life, but those around you and the world. And I actually have spoken to a couple of people this week, and it was just so fitting. I was like, oh, you need to read Courage is Calling, because what you're telling me, this actually will help you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like how he does break it down into those 3 categories, because you do need one after the other. And I love that he does address fear as the number one thing that like people need to get over first, and then find a way to get over the hurdle, because that's when courage can take over.
Yeah.
So I love that.
So we're going to do things a little bit differently. Let's go through each of those steps, but dun, dun, we're gonna play a little debate game where Tapas is for the book, and I'm going to actually share why I did not like the book. And this is different for us because up until this point, we really, everything that we've read, we really liked. And even though there maybe have been some parts, we haven't really vocalized what we didn't like so much. And then after reading this book, it kind of gave me a little bit more courage to be like, you know what, I'm going to be a little bit more honest with my reviews, and I'm just going to give it straight. So Ryan Holiday, thank you for giving me the courage to share that I did not necessarily really like your book. And I will share why. All right, so let's go through the first part, fear. What did you really like about fear? What did you take away from it?
So I like how he does kind of give a lot of examples in the books. He does go over Nightingale and how she like had this fear in herself that she had a higher calling. She needed to. She had something in her that she really wanted to get out there, but she pushed it back because she was fearful of what people will think of her, or what her family will think of her. And she really pushed it back. So I like how he does break that down, because we all have fear. That's the first emotion we feel when we feel like, okay, we need to make a change. But I'm gonna make a huge change, but that's gonna instill like all these different things in my life that I don't know if I'm prepared for. And we have
the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And so Ryan Holiday kind of just says, well, it's gonna be there. You have to acknowledge that fear is gonna be there, but you have to find a way to get around it. And maybe even bring it with you. It's a part of it. Every single thing you start, there's always going to be fear behind it. All these courageous people that have done things in the past, there was a sense of fear, right? So that's why I do like that he does address that first, because we all have fear before we do anything courageous.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I did not like is the fact that he was so matter of fact about fear. It was almost like, just get over your fear. Everyone has it. And I don't think that he did a good job explaining the biology of our fear and why we have fear. It was more of one-sided. He references, hey, our ancestors are really brave. All of the people that came before us are really brave, and so it's in our DNA to be brave, and yet we are not. And why? Not even necessarily why. It's more of like just, if this is your situation, get over it. And I think it's a little insensitive in a way, because yes, maybe we do come from lines of braveness, which is why we are to where we are today, right? Because today is definitely much greater than what it was decades and millennials before. However, we have fear because of things that we've been fearful about, right? It's almost like a protective mechanism. We've gone through certain things, and that's why we are scared, because we know what it feels like to be scared, and we self-preserve by not wanting to feel that way again. So he doesn't really address that. He's really more one-sided of like, yes, there's fear, but just get over it. And so that, I was just like, it made me feel like, hey, yes, there's fear, but we also have to realize, like you said, like, take it with you and almost come up with a plan. Like, acknowledge, yes, we have fear. Why is my fear there? And it's okay to have the fear. How am I going to come up with a plan so that at a particular time or in this moment in life, I will aim to get over it versus just forget it?
Yeah. That's also his writing style, though.
Yes.
Like if you read the other books in the past,
and it's like he's a coach, like what you said, right? He's just like straightforward and to it.
Like when you read Ego is the Enemy, right? And he doesn't go into the background of why people have egos. He just says, you have an ego, here's what you need to do. Yeah. And it's just it's very matter of fact as well. And so it's the same thing here, like, yes, fear is there, and he just says, we all know it's there. Here's how we're gonna do it. And he doesn't do a good job going into the why fear develops. Why do people have this in them?
It's not a biology book, so yes.
And he's very just direct and says, this is the issue. Here's how you're gonna do it differently. Yeah. So I can see where that could be an issue, because people who might pick up the book the first time, they're like, well, I'm trying to understand why I'm having this fear. And he's just saying, well, just get over it, and this is how you do it.
The thing with Ryan Holiday is, just like the Daily Stoic book, he's more of a each day is one separate thing. Each
Mm-hmm.
chapter is one separate thing, because the book actually, even though he has a 3-step process, you can pick it up anywhere
Mm-hmm.
and read it, and
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't really make a difference, because each chapter is almost like a daily affirmation,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and it's just a tip or a tidbit for you to just get
Yes,
on with
that's
it.
true.
And so I think that's what threw me off in reading self-help and how-to books. It's almost like a stepwise fashion,
Mm-hmm.
and this is just like, well, this is what it is, just jump to that
Yeah.
step and just get over it and move on. So it was hard for me to even get on this book. Like, my husband even was like, you've been reading this book for a long
And it's not that long of a
time,
book either.
and it's a small book. Like, it's physically a small
Yeah,
book,
it
right?
is.
Like, when you hold it in your hands, like
Yeah,
your whole hand's
I mean,
bigger than that book.
I remember when I read it, it was on a Kindle, and I also had it on Audible. And then when I bought this book for this review, and I was like, "Is this?" I told my wife, "I'm like, is this book just really small, or is it just me? Like, did I
Yeah.
just keep trying it or something?" But
Yeah.
apparently books are like tiny.
We went camping this past weekend with my family and some friends, and Brian was like, you've been reading this book for a very long time. I can tell you don't like it because you haven't really moved. And I was like, I know, it's so hard. But the fear part, that first part, was really hard because I couldn't connect.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that there was a relationship. And I think for people who need coaches to just yell at them and say, get off your ass and do it, like, this totally works. But for someone that's like, a little more emotionally invested, it was hard for me to be on board with it.
Yeah. That's true. I can see that.
But as he goes through the fear steps, he does, like you said, he gives a lot of good examples of Florence Nightingale and things like that. What I will say, though, is in the beginning, these examples that he gives, I also didn't connect with, because it was people who are privileged, right? And what I would say, what I personally feel like, this is kind of, maybe it's a societal thing, but sadly, I feel like courage is almost a privilege.
Okay.
And there are some people who can't afford to just throw away their fears and do what it is that their heart tells them to do, because there are other situations and things that they have to prioritize or sacrifice for. And I think that's a different type of courage. But again, it goes back to that. Is it the right time for you? And if you know that this is your fear, how do you create the steps so that you can get out of that fear and eventually be courageous enough to do what you want to do?
So what would you say to maybe some like high schooler who decides that, they want their families told them to become doctors and engineers and all that kind of stuff, and the family's not really well off, so they're expecting you to become this doctor so you can provide for the family.
Okay.
And let's say that person, their heart tells them that they want to be an artist.
Okay.
And that's not gonna make a lot of money, but they decide to pursue
Well, some artists do. Some artists make a lot of money.
Yeah, but not all the time, right? Like, you don't see as many successful in the percent of artists out there. You don't see many successful artists versus like a doctor. You're guaranteed to make a lot of money, right? Yes, there's a lot of loans involved.
I don't think it's a guarantee. There's no guarantee in anything, and I think right there it's based off of education and knowledge of what it is, right? Because yes, most coming from Asian families, I think the general consensus, not always, but the stereotype is like, hey, grow up and be a doctor or be something, because that's how you make money. It's not because you want to save people or help people. It's because that's how you make money, and that's how you can take care of the rest of the family, right? And so it's that, how do we help educate and teach that that's not the only way to make money?
Like, so that person saying, I'm going to go against my family, and I'm going to say, I really feel like I'm going to be passionate and be an artist. And then let's say,
but again, we're talking about a situation that's privileged, that you have the option to say, I get to go to school. I get to choose to be a doctor.
What if that family is dependent on you to become a doctor so you can pay off the loan? So the pay off the family mortgage. So they're not coming from a privileged position in terms of like having that that life circumstance where they're like, oh, I understand if it's a rich family and they're like, oh yeah, do be a doctor because that's what you need to be.
Right.
But what if like, I feel like a lot of courage, especially, I mean, I watch a lot of NBA and I see all these superstars come up, and these are just kids who like dedicated and their moms and dads are working, 4 jobs, stuff like that. And they pretty much just set their entire life just because they have this courage to become the best basketball player there is. And then obviously they become very, very rich. But it does start with that courage of someone saying, you know what, we're going to go against the grain. You're going to really focus on basketball or artist.
So I think, again, it's that time, right? I think in some situation, depending on that high schooler, whether he has the skill set to follow his passion or to do something, then that might be a little bit different. But if it's someone that doesn't have the skill set, doesn't know what they want to do, or okay, so let's say this.
Then there will be no courage, because that's the fear part,
Okay,
right?
so let's say this artist. I would say it depends. This artist, high school student, it might be that he has to go through this doctor path while doing art on the side to make enough money and then support the family and then follow his career of being an artist. I think that there's a stepwise fashion that we can't just say, give up everything and just follow your dreams all the time, because sometimes you do have responsibilities.
100%. I agree with that. But what if they're willing to work McDonald's and say, Mom and Dad, I will help you with the rent. I know I'm not going to make the money that I would make as a doctor, but I'll work at McDonald's or whatever minimum wage job.
Yeah.
And then, but I really want to pursue artistry. This is what I want to do. Yeah. And it's still, they're not in a privileged position because they're still living paycheck to paycheck. But he or she's gonna be able to fulfill their thing, right?
But that situation is privileged because he still has parents that are working and bringing in money. They can still survive. In some situations, it's life or death, and you cannot do it. You have to take care of your family. You have to sacrifice and do that first and foremost.
And that's the beauty of the book that he also says too, is that courage does not just mean you take a giant leap of faith. It could also just be a small thing, and that's
what I really loved about that.
Like you're not gonna just make this complete change and overhaul your life, or put your life on the line in war. It's more about it could just be a small, tiny change that you might make, and that's why I always think we need more courage in the world. I understand the privilege part of it, but that's also a specific example of courage.
You're right in that. That is the bigger courage.
Yeah, so and that's what people will relate to when it comes to courage.
Yep.
However, I can make a courageous move today and say I'm going to start wearing jeans instead of wearing sweats, and because jeans are more professional.
Check out our Casual Fridays reel on Instagram.
Yeah. So it could just be like that, and that could be a courageous move for you because you might just be so used to something else. So.
Yeah. So I think that's where I got lost in translation, because his courageous examples were all of the big examples, right? Not in the daily small moments that you're talking about. So if there was a little more emphasis on that, then I think that would connect to a lot of people as well, because it can throw someone off when it's just like these big privileged stories of people who have financial support, and it doesn't really matter, because if they make a mistake or they do something courageous, they have something to fall back on, and not everyone in the world has something to fall back on.
I think the only example that I would say doesn't fall in that bucket is probably the MLK example, because he does go over MLK in the book and says
and he does that in the second part. Yeah. So under fear.
And then, and so it's MLK. What could have been? I mean, he really could have been shot. He was arrested. He was in jail.
Yep.
All this kind of stuff. And that was the opposite. And
he came back and risked everything.
And there's not much privilege in that.
Yeah. So let's go to the second part, courage.
Yes.
So once you overcome your fear, you get to courage. So what's that all about?
So this is what I like about this is I think the biggest hurdle you have to get over is fear, and I think once you get through that, then it's the courage to really stand up for yourself and not be a bystander. So I know in this part he gives the example of Charles de Gaulle and about how he sparked this resistance against the Nazi Germany in France, and he did it because even though he's not the most likable person, and a lot of people did not like working with him, like Churchill hated him, all that kind of stuff, but he just had this, he was courageous enough to rally France, especially when people around him were not on board. Like a lot of France, a lot of the prime minister, even his general was like, "Oh, we're just going to give up. It's okay. Nazis Germany is too powerful. We can't contend. Let's just give up and let's just go back to our normal life under Germany control." Right. And he did it. And I think that example for me was really cool. And then one of the things that he has in the book is about how one of the people asked Charles de Gaulle that worked for him, said, "Hey, you're all courageous now, but where was this earlier? And he's like, well, I was like one of you guys. I was
I was in the
afraid to
audience.
speak up. Yeah, I was afraid to speak up, but now I have this courage in me. So
I love that example. I'm glad you brought that up because one of the chapters under courage is it's good to be difficult, right? And I also like there was another one where he says something about having to be in the wild. So
yes.
what I feel is people who are courageous and stand up, they typically are the difficult people. They're the people that are they don't go with the grain, and so everyone else is just like, what is wrong with you? You're just like, just do what you're supposed to do. And this difficult person is like, no, like I know what the right thing is to do. I'm going to follow my heart and I'm going to do whatever. And so the majority never really takes to this. I honestly, they're probably not a difficult person, but they're labeled difficult because they're not with everyone else. It's not normal. They're the minority in the majority. So that, and then he says that you have to realize because you are like that, it means you're going to be ahead of your time. People aren't going to rally for you. They're not going to follow you. They're not going to support you. You're going to feel alienated for a long time. You're going to feel this isolation, and you just have to hang on to this hope. And I will share with you guys, as you know, I think I can speak on behalf of Tapas as well. We've gone through some very courageous moments in our lives recently where we had to face some fears, and we were really isolated, right? Did you feel that? I literally felt like everyone was looking at me like, you are being really dumb right now. You're making a really big mistake, and why don't you just suck it up? Just do what you're supposed to do. And in my heart, I was just like, this, because it's not the right thing. It's not my calling. I need to do what it is that's right for me. And yes, there are some supporters along the way, but you can also tell those kind of like fake supporters, right? They're just like, friends, oh, cool, great job. Right. They're saying what they're supposed to say, but really they then turn around. They're like, this idiot, this fool, like, that's such a dumb move. So I think that's really, at least for me, I connected with that really well because it just made me remember that like it's okay to be alone, and it's okay that I'm ahead of the time, and I'm just doing this for me, and it doesn't really matter.
The next part in this chapters that I liked about courage is contagious. I love how he goes into that. Very because, like you said, there's isolation initially, but then once you have the courage, then people will start to say, oh, like, you know, they start to speak up more and more. And you can see that just spread throughout.
Yeah. So, it takes time, but then you definitely see it. And really, sometimes all it takes is just like that right person. And then it really takes off like wildfire.
So what didn't you like about this
So
part?
again, very similar to the first part of fear is that there wasn't a lot of examples that I felt like I was relatable to me. So again, I felt like, hey, it almost was like, yes, you can be courageous if you have that privilege or the opportunity to. And then it was just not necessarily the message, because I do love the message itself. Like I think overall, what I do like this book, because Courage is Calling is such a great message. It's so important. And I do think that everyone should read this book, right? Because it had a profound effect on you, and I think that it could change the world in one way or another. I just don't like how it's written. I don't like how each chapter is its own separate thing, and then sometimes he brings back an example, and sometimes he adds a new example. I just got really lost in it, and it was almost it was a weird how-to for me. Like in Courage, they have all of these steps, and all of these steps I felt like he ended each chapter and it felt like it was the end of the book. Like literally you can just go to each chapter and read the last line, and that was like the finalization.
It's like he ends a chapter with a grand statement, and then you can tell like he wants to make it emphasis on it, but then like you could really end the book that.
And I was like, oh, another chapter. Oh, another chapter.
I can see
that. So I think more in this part, I would say what I didn't like is a continuation of that writing style, and I think it's just not something that I connect to. Not anything bad, but I just think that if you weren't mentally prepared for it, then it's harder to follow. I think that had I been mentally prepared, then it wouldn't be as bad.
Yeah, and I know and I agree with you in the fact that his examples do jump in and out a lot. So like he'll go from like one paragraph, it's like, this is the middle of Courage, and he had given the whole Florence Nightingale example in the fear part, but he'll like throw a whole paragraph about, oh, Nightingale did this, and this, and then like the next paragraph will be, oh, and don't forget de Gaulle, he did this, and it's like, okay, you just jump 3 different examples again.
Yes.
And then the very next chapter is the same thing again. So I can see where he does jump around a lot, versus some other authors might just spend the entire chapter on one example and like really like emphasize it.
I think the editing of this book also could have been a little more spent on. There were some things I was like, that I'm not great at grammar in English, but there were some parts I was like, I don't know if this is right. It's current tense, past tense,
Yeah, I agree.
tense, capitalization, and that. So that's where I was getting a little picky with the book.
When we did our summary, and I was reading some of the quotes that you wrote on there, I'm like, and then I would read it. I'm like, dude, this doesn't sound right. She's like,
this is verbatim from the book.
Literally, this is from the book. All right. I'm like, oh my god. Okay. Oh, I guess I'll read it because I don't want to like offend Ryan Holiday, but. Yeah, there were some like that doesn't sound right to me.
I would say fear. The first part was easier for me to get through. The courage part, which is the bulk of the book, was really hard. I sat on this for a really long time just because I couldn't get through it. But when you go into the what does he call it? The heroic. I actually loved this chapter, this part of the book. Yeah.
Okay, so which part? What did you like about this?
I think he brings in more of the examples of like MLK and the people that are not necessarily privileged. And then I started connecting a little bit more. And then I love the overall message of like, hey, up until the point of courage, you're doing things for yourself, right? And now this heroic part is about elevating that. Now you're not looking at the benefit of yourself. You're looking at like how you can benefit the world. And I think what probably connected me with this so much is because of this is what we've been trying to do with Eat, Read, Sleep, right? We're really trying to spread the message and the goodness of literature, putting pen to paper to the web for everyone to hear and see. And hopefully, if it's just one sentence or one line that can impact someone's lives, like that's what we want to do.
Yes, agreed.
It's that like helping others that I just felt like, yes, this is what it's all about. And that I connected with that.
Yeah, because he does emphasize a lot the whole selflessness part of it, which I know like sometimes, especially when the traditional sense of courage, it seemed like a very selfish thing. You're doing it for yourself. You want to make your life better. But then he kind of just tie it back in and say, well, your courage will help, and your courage should help impact other people around you, right? So he had the 300 example with King Leonidas about how he took his troops to fight the war against Xerxes and Persians, the Spartans, right? And he was gonna die, and that was the plan. They were all gonna fight to the death, but he wanted to make sure that this sparks something in somebody else. He wanted to use himself as an example. So it took courage for him to march his army out there, but then it also took it also kind of spread, because in Greece was like, well, if they're going to be able to go against 300 to 1,000,000 and still like do a good damage to their army, we can do the same thing here. So like it's cool to see how he does say like you need to have your courage also like help spread it to other people, to help other people out too.
I think we'll go in and share some of our own moments of fear and our own calls to courage, but I think that the one thing that is really, at least for me, I feel like once you get past your fear, it's just so much easier to have that courage. And you look back and you're like, why was that so hard? Like you just get over that little hump. And then once you go from courage to heroism, you just can't go back. And it's like, now with Eat, Read, Sleep, honestly, like before, I was very selfish. I'll share. Like everything that I did was like, okay, how do I make sure I make more money? How do I take care of my family? How do I do all this? And now it's like, how do I help other people be happy? How do we like use our platform to help people feel good about what it is that they're doing and help others feel the same way? And you just look at the world a little bit differently. You look at life a little bit differently, and it feels. There's like a peace and a happiness that I really can't explain. And I hope that's why this book is great in that sense. That I do hope that you guys pick up this book and read it, even though it's editorially not not my favorite. The message itself is grand.
Yes, agreed. If you've read his other stuff, this will be easy transition. If this is your first Ryan Holiday book,
you will be mentally prepared.
You will be like, okay, this is jumping out.
And I do like this heroism part is, at least for us, I think we connect some of our favorite authors like Stephen Covey, right? You don't just talk about your own self-help, but you talk about how do you help others around in the world. Because if you're just talking about your own self-help and what it is that you can do to benefit yourself, you're never going to achieve that growth and that happiness that you really need to, because that's what, life is all about. Impacting others.
All right, so let's get into
the homework that you gave me.
All
All right, so I asked Tapas and I myself will share one moment of fear in his life that held him back from something, and then a moment of a call to courage.
So moment of fear was for me was not standing up for myself a lot, especially when I first started my career. As a leader, I would get a lot
When
of.
you were working for me?
No. After you, after you. I felt more comfortable because you had an environment that you were allowed open dialogue. And then when I got to my next boss, as I got promoted, there wasn't much space for open dialogue, right? And it does take courage for people to speak up, especially when you're like trying to get promoted, you're trying to show off that you deserve your role. So there were a lot of times where I had to just keep my mouth shut, or I had something that I wanted to say or do, I would just say I'm not going to do it for the fear of backlash or for the fear of judgment from my bosses.
Did you fear you would lose your job?
Or my job, and there was an instance where I, was doing things so differently from what my boss wanted. So I actually had gotten written up, and under that, and that like completely set me back further. I'm like, oh wow, I could actually get fired for this. So there was that moment where I was like, you know what, I guess I can't be courageous because it's gonna hold me back. How about you?
Mine's a little different. So Ryan Holiday in his book, the very last chapter, I loved this chapter, by the way, probably because it was more storytelling. Ryan shares that he used to be the marketing director at American Apparel, the company, and he was asked to do something illegal, unethical, immoral, and he stood up for himself and he said, no, I'm not going to do it. Come to realize a couple of weeks later that thing happened anyway because someone else did it. And so he thought he was being courageous in the moment, and then he realized that he wasn't because he didn't prevent that thing from happening, and now it was going out. So my story is a little similar to that, not as drastic, but I was working on a team with a fellow peer, and I had felt this animosity towards me. And this was someone that I actually really respected. I really respected this person, and I thought they were a really great worker. I thought that, what they did was pretty amazing. They were also very intimidating. And that's probably just my own insecurity, but it got to a point where I was like, hey, so something just doesn't feel right. I felt like I was being thrown under the bus. And so I said, hey, because I respect this person and because I want to have a really great relationship with them, I'm going to confront them. I took a lot of Brene Brown's like dare to lead and be vulnerable and whatnot. So I approached this person and I said, hey, I want to share something. This is how I'm feeling. I feel like there's something between us. Did I do something wrong? Can we rectify this? I would just want to make sure, like, what's your point of view? Because this situation happened where you kind of threw me under the bus. What was that all about? And what I failed to do, in Courage of Calling, there is a chapter in here that says, like, you need to train and be prepared and be aware of, like, all the situations that might happen. I failed to do that. I didn't think about what the reactions, the different types of reactions could have been. I imagined in my head this person would say, oh, like, that's not what I meant.
Calling me out on this.
Yeah. And because I looked up to this person so much, and the response that I got was like this screaming and yelling and like almost tantrum like what the fuck are you talking about? And it was just, I was in so much shock that I didn't know how to respond. And that fear in that moment was like, oh my God, like, this person that I respected, I totally completely lost respect for them because it wasn't meant to be a confrontational conversation. It was meant to be like, this is how I feel. Can I understand what your point of view? And it didn't end up like that at all. And so, I left the conversation not really saying much because I didn't know what else to say when someone's screaming and yelling at you. And my intentions weren't, I didn't want to argue back or say anything. It was just, they're upset. I don't know how else to help the situation. And I left that conversation being like, okay, well, it is what it is. I can't really change a person. And then what I realized my failure is that the way that this person acts, they're still like that to others. They're very they use intimidation to scare other people, to come off powerful and get other people to do things. And that's not my style. And although I can't change people, I did the best that I could to help, but I do feel like I should have been able to have said more in that moment because nothing's really changed.
Did it change you? Like, did it kind of prevent you from maybe doing the same thing to somebody else in the future?
Not at all.
Okay.
No,
So
because
it's just a one-off thing.
Well,
Okay.
because I know that, and especially from a lot of what Brene Brown teaches and all the books that we've gone through, like I'm not responsible for someone's reaction, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I look at it almost in a sad way that like they're going through a lot, that one question, one honest, genuine, like, how can I help you, triggered so much that they like blew up. And I was just like, you know, it's not the time to help this person, and it's not my job to help that person. So I hope that one day, once they are able to get to a good place, they can look back and say like, hey, there was a person that actually did care enough to stand up to me and tell me, because I know in this person's reign of work, like what they say, everyone jumps and just does it, right? Like everyone just listens to them because they're scared. And I don't think that anyone wants to go through life having everyone scared of them. Maybe they feel like that's the only way to get things done, but eventually you get into a place where you realize that like fear is not the right way to get things done.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true.
But I am sad in that I didn't know how to respond in that moment, and I wish that I could have done more to like almost shake this person and say like, hey, like this isn't okay. You can't respond in this way. Like it's disrespectful. And
you're just trying to help them out, or just trying to get a good conversation with them, and just kind of blow up in your face like that.
So let's go do a little bit more positivity. Let's hear about your call to courage.
So we're going to go into this a lot more next week. So we'll kind of tease it a little bit. So I'm not going to go too in depth with this, but changing careers.
I love teasers.
So, quitting my very successful, high paying job to do this full time. So stay tuned for that. We're gonna. I'm not gonna go into it more, but this is my call to courage.
We've got some goodies for you guys. Yes, call to courage, very similar as well. Leaving our corporate 6-figure job and taking care of my daughter. Specifically, my daughter is going through developmental delays, and it really, I had a wake up moment where I was just like, either I make a lot of money and be able to do all of these great things with my family on vacations or PTO or whatnot, or I don't make money. We live off of peanut butter jelly sandwich, but I'm present every single moment, waking moment of my daughter's life, and I help build her confidence, and I show her that I'm here for her. And it was just, yes, there was fear, but it also was a very easy call as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing I'll share, I don't think I mentioned in our next video, but is there was many years of fear.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That I wanted to make a move like this, and I suppress, and then finally it came to a point where like, I need to just be courageous and do this. So,
and that's the thing that I do want to address with our viewers today is that your calling comes to you from the universe, right? There's things that the universe wants to do to help you. It's meant to be here. We draw back from the alchemists that like signs and omens are meant for you to take advantage of. But if you don't answer, eventually the universe will stop calling you, and you'll find yourself stuck in a position where you look back and you're like, where the fuck did my life go? Like, what happened to me? And it's because you missed out on your calling.
Yeah, like the crystal maker in The Alchemist, right? You eventually you just it stays in your little zone. You never progress further. So
if any of you guys have an inkling or a calling for you, or just this kind of voice in your head that's like, this just doesn't feel right, like there has to be more than this. There's definitely more, and maybe there's fear, maybe it might not be the right time, but address it, look at it and say like, what's the fear, what's going on, and how do I move out of this fear, and how long will that take me, and come up with that plan for it. Because like you said, T, it was a couple of years of fear, right, that led you to this point of answering that call to courage. So in all of us, there's a right time and a place, but there's also a calling that we can't put off for too long, because when you do, gone forever. You guys, please pick up this book. It's a great message. Decent read. And cheers. Happy birthday, T.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.